Welcome to itManageCast, the podcast for busy IT professionals who want news, reviews, and interviews on the topics of IT operations, service, and project management. So put your head in the cloud for the next 30 minutes and join your host, Jason Kennedy, for this week's episode of itManageCast.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to episode 5 of itManageCast, the podcast for busy IT professionals who want news, reviews, and most importantly, interviews on IT service, operations, and project management. I'm Jason Kennedy, your absent-minded host, and I will be your host today, as I am most days, to discuss quality assurance for today's IT professional with our very special guest, Christopher Scharer. Christopher, welcome to the show again, and thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely, not a problem. So the absent-minded and again comments that I'm making here, just for those who are listening, is because I actually forgot to start the digital recorder off the beginning of the show. So we're actually redoing the beginning of the show here. But the good news is, for you listening to the show, we're very well practiced at it now.
Does this mean I get the double bill?
Absolutely. You were going to get paid twice what you were originally going to get paid to do this show.
All right. Great. 2 times 0. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, we're all about quality here. So before we get into the meat of things, I'd like to play a little game with you, Christopher, that we use it to help our listeners get to know you a little bit better as a person, and also to, for my personal enjoyment in tormenting our guests. The game's called 5 Quick Questions, where I'm going to ask you 5 brief questions and ask you to provide me with a quick answer, the first one off the top of your head for each question. And since now you've had practice at it, you should be really good at it.
Yeah, and actually, I believe I recall, I think it was 2009 or 2010 at the HP conference when you caught me off guard at the beginning of an interview, so I was a little more prepared this time.
Awesome. Yes, well, and I'm a little more practiced at how to interview people and not catch them off guard or make them feel awkward. Well, I'm still good at making them feel awkward, but that's a whole different thing. All right, sir, you ready to go?
I'm ready.
Okay, so first question, favorite vacation spot?
Well, I don't know if I could say I have a favorite vacation spot, Jason, yet. I mean, there are several places that I've enjoyed going. I've been to a lot of places, everywhere from Barcelona to Zurich, and I've loved them all. They've all had their own unique qualities and great food in every one of those places. So I would have to say any place that has good food, which is just about anywhere. But I have so many places yet that I want to visit. So any place with good food, and I love Vegas, obviously.
Absolutely, yes. We've met in Vegas many times, and I'm sure you'll be there many times more. That's awesome. And hey, good food, always a good way to pick a favorite spot. And I have to also say, just want to throw it in there, I love the way that you did sort of the Brussels or Barcelona to Zurich. You got like the alphabet, the span of the whole alphabet in there. That was classy. I like.
Yeah, well, I haven't been to Argentina yet, so.
Awesome. That's fantastic, man. All right, next question: pen or pencil?
Actually, I would have to go with Word Times New Roman 12-point font.
Okay.
I don't even know if I know how to use a pen or pencil anymore.
Fantastic. So yeah, I'm picking up a trend on some of our guests now where they're moving away from pen or pencil and it's to stylus or keyboard now. But that's all right. I still like asking the question. All right. Our next choice question, preference question here: Apple, Windows, or Linux?
I would have to say Windows, Jason. My entire the majority of, if not almost all of my experience with IT and computers has been with Windows. When I started using them back in the early 80s, when I think before, the last I remember was Windows 3.1, as far back as I remember, but I think I actually was involved with computers even before then.
Fantastic. Wow. Windows 3.1. There's a flashback. All right.
Some people might call that a nightmare.
Yeah. Well, depending on what you were doing at the time. All right. Question number 4. Last book you read.
The last book I read was Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Interesting. Okay.
Fortunately, I don't fall into either one of those.
In between, Dad. Good.
Well, fortunately, I don't fall into one. Unfortunately, I don't fall into the other.
Well, keep working at it. You'll get there. Just set your goal a little higher. All right. Question number 5. If your workplace was burning down and you could only take one thing out with you, what would it be?
Well, Jason, I assumed that I would have my cell phone in my pocket, as I usually do, so I would probably have to go with my laptop, because all that information and networking connections, all that stuff is basically a big part of my life. So not having my laptop would be very, very detrimental.
Okay, good to know. Hey, and on that note, you should listen to our previous episode on disaster recovery. So just throw that out there. Okay.
Well, fortunately, I do have everything stored in the cloud somewhere.
There you go. Somewhere in the cloud. Excellent. And that'll be a future episode, I'm sure. All right. Thanks, Christopher. I really appreciate you letting us torment you, and those are some fun answers. So now that we've given a little bit of a personal background on you, can you maybe share your professional background with our listeners? And if you'd like, share with folks how they can reach you if they would like to follow up with you on anything from today's show.
Sure, Jason. I don't want to take too much time here, but I will say that I first got involved in computers when my uncle gave me an Apple IIe or Apple IIc back in the early 80s, and I started my programming or copying programs from a book, and learned early on about disaster recovery. After spending 3 hours copying a program and having my hard drive crash, I learned to save and save often. But since that time, I went to college and got a degree in computer science, business computer programming in '97. Shortly after that, I spent a brief period, about 6 months to a year, as a software developer. This obviously was back still in the client server mainframe environments. And shortly after that, I actually moved to Des Moines, Iowa, to take a position using Mercury Interactive's Windrunner and Test Director, which was my first my entrance into automated testing. Since that time, HP acquired Mercury in 2006, and I previously was a member of the Des Moines Mercury User Group and Twin Cities Mercury User Group. And in around 2007, I transitioned into the new organization known as Vivid Worldwide. Shortly after that, I became one of the Iowa chapter co-leaders, organized the Nebraska chapter, and I'm also now a member of the Testing, Quality, and Application Lifecycle Management Special Interest Group. I'm actually serving my second 3-year term as a board director and currently the treasurer, and I'm up for re-election this June. So hopefully I'll be re-elected and spend more time working with the incredible staff, consultants, contractors, and all of the volunteers with that organization. If anyone wants to reach me, they can email me at christopher.scharer, and that's SCHARER, at Vivit, VIVIT, worldwide.org.
Thanks for that, Christopher. And definitely we'll make sure that contact information is on the show notes for today's show. So if folks want to try and figure out how to spell your last name, or make sure that they type Vivit correctly, we'll have that in there. Just as a little bit of a lead-in, our next episode, we will actually be interviewing Rocky Pisto and talking in more depth around the Vivit Worldwide organization, which is where Christopher and I first met.
Correct. And I remember your intro questions back at a HP Discover conference that threw me a bit, but I think I had a relatively good recovery.
Awesome. Yeah, you're pretty good at thinking on your feet, so that's good. I got to give you that. Well, thanks, Christopher. I appreciate you giving us that information. And as we said, the topic for today is quality assurance, and it's a big subject to tackle in a single podcast. But perhaps I can ask you to help us get started by defining what quality assurance means and why it's important in delivering IT solutions.
Yes, Jason, and quality assurance is very important. Back in the early or late 90s, mid to late 90s, quality assurance was actually just evolving, or automated quality assurance, I should say. Quality assurance really wasn't. It really wasn't. What's the word I'm looking for? Embraced. It really wasn't embraced by organizations. It was kind of an afterthought.
Right.
But nowadays it's very much integrated into organizations and their software development life cycles. It's very important to differentiate, though, the difference between quality assurance and quality control, because those are two separate things. Quality control is a process by which entities review the quality of all factors involved in production. ISO 9000 defines quality control as part of quality management, focus on fulfilling quality requirements. Now, quality assurance is a way of preventing mistakes or defects in manufactured products and avoiding problems when delivering solutions or services to customers. ISO 9000 defines quality assurance as a part of quality management focused on providing confidence that quality requirements will be fulfilled. What this means is basically that your QA, or quality assurance, is put in place to assist in determining whether or not to release a build, and hence affects the decision of quality control.
So there, if I understand correctly, Christopher, it's like there's a spectrum here that of quality management that quality assurance and quality control both fit in, and quality assurance in a way kind of sets what those expectations are going to be measured in the quality control process.
Right, that's exactly correct, Jason. Basically, what happens nowadays, as opposed to when QA was first introduced, when it wasn't embraced. Right nowadays, with the transition from waterfall to agile or even continuous integration, your quality assurance is actually built into your software lifecycle. It's built into each release. You have teams that are made up of developers, quality assurance people, business analysts, that all work in tandem with in what are referred to as sprints, which are basically 2-week periods where certain items that are basically user stories are developed, and a team, or a scrum, if you will, works on those, and they work in tandem. And at the end of each sprint, you basically you can create your build. And what quality assurance will typically do is they'll do smoke tests, whether it's manual or automated, that will determine if anything major is broken, and if not, then that typically justifies the quality control that you have a decent enough release that you can release to your users. And what also is involved with that is you have made a test that get put into a regression suite that get run at the end of each build, that basically test all the requirements for that specific user stories in that sprint, that verify that everything is working as it should, and none of the new changes or none of the newly implemented code has broken any of the previously working functionality.
Wow. Okay, that's really helpful. And Christopher, just in case some of our listeners, perhaps they come more from the IT operations side of things and less from the software development or project management side of things, they may be familiar with the term bug testing as an older term. How does that relate to quality assurance?
I guess, Jason, I would relate that to, associate it with manual or automated software testing that assists the QA member in determining defects. Now, this only scratches the surface of the software development lifecycle and quality assurance. Without getting into a long discussion on waterfall, agile, and continuous integration, I just want to say that one of the biggest things that quality assurance and quality control needs to coordinate with each other on, as well as dev and ops, is traceability. And really, that's the big about quality assurance, is that determining where you have defects and the traceability of those defects, and what back to what code actually is tied to that defect, so you can get that code fixed, and so your tests now work, and you have a good build that you can submit and release.
Okay, so when you say
the big thing there is the traceability.
Okay, so Christopher, when you say traceability,
no, that's it.
Sorry, we're fighting just a little bit of internet delay there. When you say traceability, what, if I understand correctly, what you mean is the ability when you run the actual quality tests and your test scripts to actually know what code that's directly relating to, so that you can actually fix things?
Correct. With the way, with the agile or continuous integration nowadays, with your teams working together, you have your user stories, and in your user story you have all the requirements that have to be fulfilled for that specific user story within a sprint. And those are all tied very neatly together. And so when you do your test, that test that you're doing is specific to a user story, and more specifically, it's specific to a requirement within the user story. And so when a requirement in that user story doesn't work, or your quality assurance test fails, you know you have a defect for that requirement, and that requirement goes directly back to that story, which is also where the developers know what they need to change, and what code is associated with that story and those requirements. So you have 100% traceability between all of your testing and development and any defects that arise.
Okay, very helpful. Thank you. So the function of QA. I'm going to shift gears here just a little bit, but there's a lot of conversations I've been privy to around whether the function of QA operates best as an internal function of the organization or an external function of the organization. And really what I'm talking about is, should QA be run in-house or outsourced or external? Where's there more accountability? There's a whole lot of different arguments I've heard for either side. What's your take on that, Christopher?
Jason, that's a very good question, but one that really has some dependencies. I'm sure you're used to hearing that word in the IT industry, and with technology now, dependencies are no less important than they were back in the 80s. I guess some questions might be, are you working with a government or state organization? If so, the external or outsourcing may not be an option due to security concerns, and that could be the case with other organizations as well.
Right.
Another thing to consider is, who's managing the internal or outsourced resources. You really want to be careful about who you have manage your resources, because if you have poor management, then you really that may not be a benefit, and you may see a lack of return on investment. In previous years, companies were quick to have work done externally or outsourced work, but often companies found the cost outweighed the benefit because of the lack of or poor management of the external resources. Even recently, I've heard from some people in the industry about other issues arising, such as an external company and external resources making promises of what they can deliver just to get their foot in the door. And this to me would be a big concern for any organization looking to save money or get better ROI. Obviously, once you have some external resources in the door, then it's very easy for them to find ways to just keep their foot in the door, and that is not, that's not what I don't think that's what organizations are looking for when they're looking for better ROI.
Right. Oh, absolutely. So that's a really interesting perspective. Thanks, Christopher. I appreciate that. So, given that,
my pleasure.
Thanks. Given that, if our listeners are thinking, well, we don't have a formal QA practice in place today, and I really need to help my business, which is funding these IT functions. I need to help them understand the importance of QA. where would you advise they start that conversation with the rest of the business?
Well, Jason, as I'm sure you know, QA really needs to start in the requirements phase, which is basically at the beginning of the project. The later QA is introduced, the more likely there will be a higher rate of defects and more changes to requirements, which in turn end up costing much more. If I recall correctly, I believe defects not found in the requirements phase can end up costing 10 times or more to repair when found after deployment rather than in the requirements phase. One of the big things around that nowadays, and I don't think it's any more now than I don't think it's any more significant now than it was previously, but it's a lot more prevalent, I guess I would say, is that if you don't find a defect until something's released, or if your end user finds a defect, that's really a big impact to your organization and the quality of your applications, because as you know, nowadays, if people find a defect on their mobile phone, they're less likely to use that app. They're 30% more likely to go find somebody else to use, because they want something that's more stable and more reliable.
So it's the
with organizations
cost.
increasingly, yeah, and with organizations increasingly using agile or continuous integration, this would actually be built into the Scrum team, so it would be integrated with your development and be part of the user stories, which is ideal.
Excellent. Okay, that's really helpful, Christopher. Thanks. So if you can convince your organization that they need to take QA seriously, or if you're building a QA practice in your organization, what are the most important skills that a QA professional should possess?
Well, there are a lot of skills that a QA professional should have, and I can't tell you all of them because it really depends on your organization and what you're looking to get out of your QA. But typically, and in no specific order, I would say the QA professional must be detail-oriented. When testing requirements, it's not a guessing game. Either it works correctly based on the requirements, or it does not. And if not, a defect needs to be opened and tracked so quality control can keep track of what can be released. And that's what I mean when I'm talking about QA coordinating with QC. Quality assurance needs to track that stuff so quality control knows where they're at from a release perspective. This is just one aspect of the traceability. Secondly, they must be flexible and or adaptable. Tomorrow is always a new day. Things change, and a QA professional has to be ready to change with it in an instant. They have to know how to shift gears and use new tools or different processes. With the increase in services these days, it's nothing like the past. Changes, however, and it's constant and constantly around us. It's kind of ironic how change is a constant here too. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, that's IT. But yeah.
Yeah, and I guess another thing is they'd have to be a team player and be able to work in a group, as well as work as an individual. But the days of working in a silo are fading away, if not gone altogether nowadays. You definitely have to be able to work within a group, because any agile or continuous integration requires you to work with multiple players, from the business analyst to the developer to even the Scrum Master. But you also have to be able to take that work that you've worked on with those teammates or team members in a group and take it off and get it done by yourself. You can't be dependable on somebody else to help you get your work done. It's kind of you have to be able to depend on people, but you have to also depend on yourself.
Right on. Well, that's some great feedback, Christopher. I really appreciate that. Hopefully that's going to help anybody in an IT leadership position who's trying to either establish or grow their QA in their organization with some of the key skills that they need to make sure that they're looking for, either in recruitment or development of their staff. Christopher, in your experience, do you think that IT leaders should encourage or support involvement in QA professional development for their staff? And it seems like kind of a yeah, of course they should question, but if so, maybe you can share with us how they can do that.
It's funny. I find it humorous that you've just made the last point, because Jason, I'd say that an organization, any organization that does not encourage and/or support involvement in QA professional development for their staff is a company that is destined to fall behind in the IT time-to-market race. There are several ways that an organization can do this at a cost and for free. Some examples would be to provide professional training or certifications on tools that the QA professional needs to use in their role. Now, those would be more of your cost type avenues to encourage QA professionals. Others would be, encourage your employees to join user groups and forums such as Vivit Worldwide. More importantly, when I talk about joining user groups or forums, it's not just to join them to get information. More importantly, it is to participate in the discussions and the knowledge sharing, the blogging. The importance of knowledge is not just to gain the knowledge, but it's also to share that knowledge. And the more knowledge that you gain and share, the better other people can become at their career, and the better knowledge that the better their knowledge can grow, and they can share information about things that they've learned, and in turn help everybody as well. Some organizations also give their employees a certain amount of time each week to spend on whatever they think might benefit the organization, such as developing tools to automate and help with day-to-day items that are currently done manually, or to simply modify a process to make it more efficient.
So with that last point, Christopher, what you're talking about is allowing a certain amount of time, either per week, per month, however, in the schedule that maybe you're not working on that specific business deliverable project, but you're going to take some time to just look at helping the rest of the team improve the way that we're doing things. So kind of brainstorm out what can we be doing better here in how we're delivering things, or any ideas or suggestions that come up that maybe just got pushed to the side because we just don't have time to do them. Create time, create a space for people to participate in improving the team's delivery of services. Is that what I'm hearing?
Jason, I think you got hit the head right on the nail there. And the big part of that is that a lot of times organizations, they get to a very developed point where they're very good at moving forward with their deliverables, and they have this process or these processes that are in place that work great. And sometimes I think they tend to just get on that train where that train is just keeps going forward, and it's great. It's great that you're moving forward. It's great that you're progressing. But if you don't take time occasionally to look at that train and say, why are we going this way? Although it's very efficient to go around this mountain, we could actually create a hole in the mountain and just go right through it. Any time that an organization can give back to their employee to let them find better ways for their better processes or better ways to do the work is only going to enhance your train ride, so to speak.
Fantastic. So, Christopher, we're coming close to the end of our time together here today, and I wanted to just ask you if you could leave the IT professional who's considering improving the QA function in their organization, if you could leave that person with one piece of advice, what would that be?
One of the most important things that I've found in my career as a QA professional is to keep a constant network of professionals that you can discuss QA items with and keep up on current and new technologies, and keep an open mind. Just the other day I made a comment about a program we were testing, a bending, and one of our manual automation testers looked at me like a deer looking in the headlights and said, "What's a bend?" And I said, "It's abnormal," and I guess maybe I should have said the application had a 404 or page fault error. Wow, it's just time sure flies when you're having fun doing QA, right? But really, just keeping an open mind and keeping a good network and just paying attention to technologies. Things are always changing, as you're well aware, and keeping up with that can be a struggle. It's a daily task that people have to do.
Absolutely. So with that, we're going to wrap up today's show. It's been fantastic. And Christopher, I'm going to look forward to having you back on a future show to talk more about quality assurance and the software development lifecycle, because I think there's so much we can dig in here. And listeners, if you've got some feedback on today's show that you'd like to share with us or any of our future shows, we'd really like you to send them in to us. So please make sure that you share them with us via Twitter at itManageCast or email them to us at itmanagecast@gmail.com, and we'll make sure you get full credit when we use your ideas in an upcoming episode. Well, that wraps up today's show. And Christopher, it's been fantastic speaking with you again, and I really want to thank you sincerely for joining me on the podcast.
Jason, I appreciate your inviting me, and as always, it's a pleasure talking to you. I've always enjoyed spending time with you at the HP events, and professionally, it's definitely a pleasure. It was nice talking to you, and I look forward to the next time.
Fantastic. Well, listeners, that wraps up our show. And again, Christopher, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to itManageCast. We hope you enjoyed spending this time with us, and we really want to hear from you. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at itManageCast, and email us your thoughts and opinions at itmanagecast@gmail.com. To join us for our live recordings, follow us on Google+ and YouTube. This show is Creative Commons Copyright 2015 by Jason J. Kennedy.
And that's how we make the podcast.